There are records in the royal archives that do not speak of treaties or wars or feasts. They are written not in ink, but in the frantic, scratched handwriting of men who watch something unholy unfold. They speak of a screaming that became part of the castle's architecture. Imagine a device of cold, darkened steel, weighing 20 pounds, lined with inward-facing spikes. They called it the Guardian of Grace. But for the young Queen Isolda, it was a slow, methodical assassin. Her spine was curved, a flaw the crown could not abide. So they handed her body to a man who believed that bone was just wet clay, waiting to be molded by iron. You think you know what a corset is? Forget everything. This was not fashion. This was a cage designed to crush ribs to save a dynasty. And when the sweet, sickly smell of rotting meat began to waft from beneath the steel plates, they didn't take it off. They simply tightened the screws. Friends, after hearing stories like this, you start to appreciate the 21st century. Write in the comments which modern city you are watching us from. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new survival stories. The year is 1582. The winter in the capital is harsh, freezing the gargoyles on the cathedral roof into silent, screaming statues. But inside the royal palace, the air is stiflingly hot, thick with the scent of roasted swan, beeswax candles, and the heavy perfume used to mask the stench of unwashed bodies. In the center of the great hall stands Queen Isolda. She is 19 years old. To the hundreds of dukes, counts, and ambassadors watching her from the shadows, she appears to be the epitome of regal perfection. Her gown is a fortress of gold thread and crimson velvet, stiff enough to stand on its own. Her neck is long, her head held high under the weight of a diamond tiara. She smiles, a practiced porcelain crack in a face painted white with lead. But Isolda is a liar, and every breath she takes is a calculated deception. Underneath the layers of silk, beneath the linen shift soaked in cold sweat, her body is waging a war against itself. Her spine, the very pillar of her being, is twisting. It is a slow, serpentine coiling, a scoliosis so severe that without the thick padding sewn secretly into her bodices, her left shoulder would sit inches higher than her right. In the privacy of her bedchamber, when the candles are gutted and the heavy oak doors are barred, she stands before the silver mirror and weeps. She sees the curve. It looks like the letter S carved into her flesh by a demon's fingernail. It is the mark of imperfection in a world that demands symmetry. The king, her husband, is a man obsessed with lineage. He speaks of bloodlines as a farmer speaks of breeding stock. He needs a son, strong and straight, to inherit a kingdom teetering on the edge of war. He watches Isolda with eyes that are not loving, but appraising. He counts her steps. He notices the way she winces when she sits for too long. He sees the slight tilt of her head, the way she leans against the stone pillars when she thinks no one is looking. Rumors are already spreading through the court like a plague. The whispers travel from the scullery maids to the ladies-in-waiting, and finally, to the king's ear. The queen is crooked, they hiss. Her womb must be twisted too. How can a broken vessel carry a perfect king? For Isolda, the physical pain of her condition is nothing compared to the terror of these whispers. She knows the history of this court. She knows what happens to queens who fail to provide heirs, or worse, queens who are deemed physically unfit. The convents are full of discarded wives. The graveyards are full of those who suffered mysterious accidents. Tonight, the pain in her back is a hot, throbbing knife. A muscle spasm seizes her lower ribs, threatening to buckle her knees. But she does not fall. She locks her jaw, forcing a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. She dances the pavan, a slow, stately procession, moving like a marionette whose strings are pulled by duty alone. She knows that she is fighting a losing battle. The curve is getting worse. The padding can no longer hide the deformity. The fabric is straining. The king beckons her to the throne. He does not offer his hand. He simply looks at her, his gaze drilling through the velvet, finding the secret she is desperate to keep. "You look weary, madam," he says, his voice devoid of warmth. "I am well, your majesty," she lies, curtsying low, ignoring the scream of her vertebrae grinding together. "We shall see," he replies. "I have sent for a specialist, a man from the north. They say he understands the architecture of the body better than any priest." Isolda feels a chill that has nothing to do with the winter draft. She realizes that her time of hiding is over. The silence of her suffering has been broken. The silk curtain has been pulled back, and whatever comes next will not be a cure. It will be a reckoning. He arrives 3 days later, riding a black carriage that rattles over the cobblestones like a hearse. His name is Master Silas, though the court will soon give him other darker names. He is not a priest. He is not one of the gentle herbalists who haunt the castle gardens, smelling of lavender and chamomile. Silas smells of old iron, vinegar, and dried blood. He is a man of the new science, a student of anatomy who has spent more time in morgues than in churches. He believes that the human body is merely a machine, a system of pulleys and levers that can be repaired, adjusted, or forced into compliance. He enters the Queen's chambers without bowing. His eyes are gray, flat, and entirely lacking in empathy. He carries a large leather case that clanks ominously as he sets it down on the delicate vanity table, displacing the Queen's perfumes and combs. "Disrobe," he commands. It is not a request. The Queen looks to her ladies-in-waiting, but they look away, terrified. The King has given this man absolute authority. Trembling, Isolda allows the heavy layers of her gown to be stripped away. The velvet, the corset, the shiftall fall to the floor, leaving her shivering in the drafty room, naked and vulnerable. Silas approaches her. His hands are ice cold. He does not touch her like a woman. He touches her like a carpenter inspecting a warped beam. His fingers dig into the muscles of her back, pressing hard against the protruding ridge of her spine. Isolda gasps in pain, but he does not stop. He traces the curve from her neck down to her hips, muttering measurements to himself. He pulls her shoulders back with a force that makes her joints pop. He twists her torso, testing the limits of her flexibility, indifferent to her whimpers. "It is a structural failure," Silas announces to the room, though he speaks only to the King, who stands in the doorway, watching impassively. The spine has rebelled against the natural order. It seeks to coil like a serpent. "Can it be fixed?" the King asks. Silas opens his leather case. Inside, gleaming in the candlelight, are not potions or poultices, but calipers, hammers, and strange metal retractors. "The flesh is weak, Your Majesty," Silas says, picking up a heavy iron caliper. "But bone can be persuaded. If one applies enough pressure, over enough time, even the most stubborn tree can be made to grow straight. But it requires force. It requires will." He turns back to Isolda. For the first time, he looks her in the eyes. There is a terrifying hunger in his gaze, the hunger of an artist looking at a blank canvas, or an inquisitor looking at a sinner. "Nature has failed you, madam," he whispers, his voice like grinding stones. "But do not fear. I possess something stronger than nature. We will not use herbs to soothe you. We will use iron to forge you anew." The Queen realizes with a jolt of horror that this man does not intend to heal her. He intends to remodel her. To him, she is not a patient in pain. She is a defective object that must be hammered back into shape. The King nods, satisfied. He sees a solution. Isolda sees only the instruments in the bag-serrated, heavy, cold, and knows that her body is no longer her own. It belongs to the master of pain now. The presentation takes place in the King's private study. Master Silas clears the table of maps and war plans to unfurl a massive sheet of parchment. It is a technical drawing, intricate and beautiful in its precision, but horrific in its implication. It looks less like a medical device, and more like a blueprint for a siege engine or a torture rack used in the deepest dungeons of the Inquisition. "This," Silas declares, tapping the drawing with a blackened fingernail, "is the orthopedic cuirass, the guardian of grace." The Queen, forced to attend, stares at the drawing in silence. The device depicted is a rigid cage of steel. It is designed to encase the torso completely, from the collarbone down to the hips. Unlike the whalebone corsets the ladies wear for fashion, which yield and bend, this construction is solid. It features 2 heavy steel plates, one for the chest, one for the back, connected by industrial hinges and locking mechanisms. But it is the interior that makes Isolda's blood run cold. "Observe the internal architecture," Silas explains, pointing to a series of jagged lines on the diagram. "To correct the curvature, we cannot simply squeeze the waist. We must apply counter-pressure to the ribs themselves. These inward-facing flanges, these metal teeth, will press against the protruding bones. They will push the deformity back into alignment, day and night. And the neck? The king asks, pointing to a high metal collar attached to the device. An essential component, Silas replies smoothly. The patient often tries to slump to escape the pain. This rigid collar, locked under the chin, will force the head up. It stretches the neck, elongating the spine by pure traction. She will not be able to look down. She will not be able to curl up. She will be a pillar of steel. Isolda feels bile rise in her throat. It looks unyielding, she whispers. How will I breathe? How will I sleep? Silas looks at her with mild annoyance, as if a tool had suddenly spoken. The device is perforated with small holes for ventilation, madam. As for sleep, the body adapts. The first weeks will be discomforting. But is discomfort not a small price for the salvation of your dynasty? Do you wish to remain a cripple in the eyes of God and your king? The manipulation is masterful. He traps her between her pain and her duty. The king traces the lines of the metal cage with his finger. He imagines his wife standing tall, straight, the perfect statue of a queen. He does not imagine the bruising, the crushed organs, the inability to expand the lungs. He sees only the result. Build it, the king commands. Use the finest steel from Toledo. Make it strong. Isolda looks at the blueprint, and the lines seem to move. The drawing resembles a mouthful of iron teeth, waiting to swallow her torso whole. She realizes this is not a brace. It is a coffin she will have to wear while she is still alive. Deep in the bowels of the castle, far below the velvet drapes and the perfumed chambers, lies the royal armory. Usually this place is reserved for forging swords for the king's guard or shoeing the war horses. But for the next week, the fires burn hotter and longer than usual. The king has commissioned the royal armorers to work under the direct supervision of Master Silas. The atmosphere in the forge is tense. These blacksmiths are used to making breastplates to deflect arrows, not cages to encase a woman's soft flesh. The head blacksmith, a giant of a man named Thomas, holds a piece of the red-hot steel with tongs, his face grim. He looks at the specifications Silas has provided. This metal is too thick. Thomas grunts, wiping soot from his brow. It's heavy, 20 pounds, maybe more. And these edges, you want us to sharpen the internal ridges? If she moves, it will cut her. That is the point, Silas replies, standing in the shadows, his face illuminated by the orange glow of the furnace. Pain is the teacher. If the metal bites, she will learn to hold herself still. She will learn to pull away from the pain, and in doing so, she will straighten herself. Do not question the science, Smith. Just hammer. So they hammer. The sound echoes through the stone vents of the castle, a rhythmic clang, clang, clang that sounds like a death knell. Up in her tower, Queen Isolda can hear it. Every strike of the hammer is a reminder of her impending fate. She lies in her bed, tracing the curve of her spine, wondering if her bones are truly so wicked that they deserve to be encased in armor forged in such heat. The process is brutal. The steel is folded, beaten, and tempered. It is dipped in oil to blacken it, preventing rust from the sweat that will inevitably soak it. The hinges are oiled to ensure they lock tight, so tight that the wearer cannot release them herself. Silas inspects every rivet. He runs his thumb along the perforated holes designed for ventilation, ensuring they are small enough to maintain the structural integrity of the cage. Finally, the device is assembled. It sits on a wooden mannequin in the center of the forge, cooling in the smoky air. It is a monstrosity of engineering. It has the silhouette of a woman, but the soul of a dungeon door. It gleams dully in the torchlight, a hollow metal torso waiting for a victim. It is done, Thomas says, dropping his hammer. He looks at the thing with disgust. He knows iron. He knows what iron does to skin. It is perfect, Silas whispers, stroking the cold flank of the corset. Now we must put the bird in the cage. The morning of the fitting is gray and joyless. The chambermaids are dismissed, leaving only Master Silas and two strong assistants in the queen's room. Isolda stands in her thin linen shift, her arms hugged around her chest, shivering violently. The device sits on the table, heavy and ominous. It looks smaller than she expected, impossibly narrow. "Arms up," Silas commands. Isolda obeys, raising her trembling arms. The assistants lift the heavy steel plates. The weight is the first shock. As they place the front plate against her chest and the back plate against her spine, Isolda's knees buckle. It is 20 pounds of dead weight hanging from her shoulders. It feels cold, leaching the heat from her body instantly through the thin linen. "Now we lock it," Silas says. The hinges snap together with a sound like a gunshot. Click. The assistants begin to turn the wing nuts on the sides. The device begins to close. At first, it is just pressure. A tight squeeze, like a firm hug. But then the screws turn further. The internal metal ridges make contact with her ribs. "Stop," Isolda gasps. It's touching the bone." "Exhale," Silas orders, ignoring her plea. "We must close the gap." He signals the assistants to turn the screws simultaneously. The metal clamps down. Isolda's breath is cut short. Her diaphragm tries to expand to draw in air, but it hits a wall of steel. She can only take shallow, sipping breaths. Panic sets in. The claustrophobia is absolute. She is buried alive in her own clothes. Then the pain begins. The corrective spikes press into the convex side of her curve. It is a sharp, grinding agony, as if a stone is being pushed into her kidney. "I cannot breathe," she cries out, clawing at the metal with her fingernails. "Please loosen it, just a little." "The constriction is necessary," Silas says calmly, checking the alignment of the neck collar. He snaps the collar shut under her chin, forcing her head up. Her jaw clicks shut. She can no longer look down at her own body. She can only stare straight ahead, tears streaming down her face. "Walk," he commands. She tries to take a step, but her center of gravity has shifted. She is stiff, rigid, moving like a tin soldier. Every step sends a jar of vibration through the metal, rubbing the steel against her raw skin. She feels the bruises forming already. Silas walks around her, admiring his work. To him, she looks magnificent. Her waist is impossibly small. Her back is forcefully straight. Her neck is long. She looks like a queen. "You see?" he says, holding a mirror up to her tear-stained face. "Perfection." Isolda looks at her reflection. She sees a stranger. A beautiful metal-encased stranger who is screaming silently behind her eyes. She realizes then that the torture is not a temporary treatment. This is her life now. She will eat in this. She will hold court in this. And God help her. She will try to sleep in this. The key to the mechanism hangs from Silas's belt. He smiles, turns on his heel, and leaves the room. The queen is alone with the iron. It is the night of the winter solstice ball. The great hall is a galaxy of candlelight, reflecting off mirrors imported from Venice. The nobility of the realm has gathered, draped in furs and jewels, waiting for the entrance of their monarchs. When the herald announces Queen Isolda, a hush falls over the crowd. She appears at the top of the marble staircase. The sight is breathtaking. For years, the court has whispered about the queen's slouch, her frailty, the way she seemed to shrink into herself. Tonight, she is a revelation. She stands impossibly tall. Her posture is rigid, commanding, unnatural in its perfection. Her waist is cinched so tightly it defies anatomy. Her neck is a swan-like column, her chin held high in an expression of haughty disdain. The crowd gasps in admiration. "Look at her," a duchess whispers. "She is the very image of majesty. God has truly healed her." But Isolda does not hear the music. She hears only the blood rushing in her ears, sounding like a roaring waterfall. Every step down the marble stairs is a calculated act of agony. The steel cuirass, hidden beneath layers of heavy brocade and petticoats, has warmed to her body temperature, but it feels no less hostile. It acts as an exoskeleton. She is not walking. The machine is walking her. As she descends, the metal plates rub against her hips. The skin there has already blistered and peeled away, leaving raw flesh to grind against the iron. But she cannot wince. The neck collar, locked tight under her jaw, prevents her from looking down to see where she places her feet. She must trust blindly that the floor is there. The king meets her at the bottom of the stairs. He looks at her with a pride that chills her soul. He does not see his wife. He sees a corrected object. A problem solved. "You are radiant," he whispers, taking her hand. "I am dying," she wants to scream. Instead, she says nothing. The collar presses against her windpipe, making speech difficult. The dance begins. It is a slow, formal procession. Isolda moves like a clockwork doll. She feels the sweat trickling down her back, pooling at the base of the spine where the metal meets the flesh. The sweat is trapped. It begins to itch, a maddening, prickly heat that she cannot scratch. The iron cage holds her so tightly that she cannot even expand her lungs enough to sigh. Midway through the dance, a courtier bumps into her. It is a gentle collision, accidental. But to Isolda, it feels like being struck by a hammer. The impact drives the internal spikes deeper into her ribs. A jolt of white-hot pain shoots up her spine. Her vision blurs. For a second, the room tilts. She feels herself falling. But she doesn't fall. She cannot fall. The corset holds her upright even as her consciousness wavers. She is propped up by the very thing that is killing her. To the observers, she merely paused for a beat of the music. To Isolda, it was a moment of death. She realized with terrified clarity that even if she died right now, standing in the middle of the ballroom, her body would not slump. She would remain standing, a beautiful straight corpse in a cage of gold and steel. The ball was a triumph for the king, but a failure for Master Silas. He is not satisfied with appearance. He demands structural change. 2 weeks have passed. The morning ritual has become a torture session that Isolda dreads more than hell itself. She does not sleep anymore. She dozes in upright chairs propped by pillows because lying down causes the rigid backplate to press painfully against her vertebrae. Silas enters with his assistants. He smells of stale wine and iron filings. He consults his notebook. "The curvature has resisted," he mutters, palpating the steel flank of the corset. "We have allowed the body too much comfort. The bone is stubborn. It thinks it can remain crooked. We must teach it obedience." He produces a large T-shaped wrench. It fits into the hexagonal sockets on the side of the corset. "Please," Isolda whispers. Her voice is a rasp. Her lips are cracked. "No more. I can feel my ribs. They feel soft." "That is the cartilage yielding," Silas says dismissively. "It is a sign of progress. Hold her." The assistants grip the queen's shoulders. Silas inserts the wrench. He does not turn it gently. He cranks it. Crack. The sound is audible in the silent room. Isolda's eyes roll back in her head. It is not just pressure now, it is crushing force. The floating ribs at the bottom of her rib cage are being forced inward, overlapping where they should not meet. The steel digs into her waist, displacing her internal organs. Her stomach is pushed up against her diaphragm. Her liver is squeezed. "Breathe," Silas commands. She tries. She gasps like a fish out of water. But there is no room. She can only take tiny, terrified sips of air. "Again," Silas says. Crack. Isolda screams, but the sound is strangled by the neck collar. A trickle of blood runs from her nose. The pressure in her head is immense. "Excellent," Silas observes, ignoring the blood. "The posture is improving. Look at the alignment of the shoulders. Mathematical perfection." The king enters the room, attracted by the noise. Isolda looks at him with pleading eyes, begging silently for mercy, begging for him to stop this madman. The king looks at his wife, whose face is gray with agony, tears cutting tracks through the white powder. He looks at Silas. "Is it working?" the king asks. "The spine is straightening, Your Majesty," Silas replies, wiping the wrench with a rag. "But the patient is weak. She lacks the will to be beautiful." The king nods slowly. "Do what you must," he says, and turns to leave. The door closes. Silas smiles and places the wrench back into the socket. It starts as a faint odor. At first, the chambermaids think it is damp wood, or perhaps a dead mouse trapped behind the wainscoting. They scrub the floors with vinegar. They burn bundles of sage and rosemary. But the smell does not leave. It grows. It becomes heavy, sweet, and cloying. the unmistakable scent of meat that has been left in the sun too long. It is emanating from the queen. It has been 6 weeks since the corset was removed. Silas has forbidden it. If we release the pressure now, he argues, the spine will snap back like a bent bow. The iron must become her skin. But beneath the iron, the skin is dying. The constant pressure has cut off blood flow to the tissue over her hips and ribs. Pressure ulcers have formed deep black craters where the flesh has rotted away down to the bone. In the darkness of the casing, bacteria breed in the warm, moist environment of sweat and blood. Isolda is delirious. She burns with a fever that makes her skin hot to the touch, heating the metal corset until it feels like a stove. She sees hallucinations. She sees green smoke curling up from her collar, a miasma of sickness. She claws at her throat, trying to unlock the mechanism, but her fingers are weak and bloody. "The smell, Silas," the king says one evening, covering his nose with a perfumed handkerchief as he stands by her bedside. "It is unholy. Is she rotting?" "It is merely the humors leaving the body." Silas lies, though even he looks pale. He knows what that smell is. Gangrene. The toxicity of the curvature is being purged. It is a green sickness leaving her. We must not interfere. The maids try to pour rose water down the gaps in the metal to wash the sores they cannot see. Isolda screams when the liquid touches her raw flesh. It does not wash away the rot. It only feeds it. Fluid begins to leak from the bottom of the corset, a dark, foul-smelling ichor that stains the silk sheets. The fly that has been buzzing around the room lands on the metal rim of the neck collar. It knows. It can smell the death inside the machine. Isolda watches the fly with glassy eyes. She envies it. It is free. Isolda is no longer a queen. She is a prisoner of war, and the war is being fought on the landscape of her own body. Sepsis has set in. The poison from the rotting wounds has entered her bloodstream, racing towards her heart. She lies in the great canopy bed, propped up by a mountain of pillows because she still cannot lie flat. The corset, her guardian of grace, has become her coffin. She is trapped in a delirious twilight. She dreams she is made of glass, and Silas is shattering her with a hammer. She dreams she is a tree, and the king is chopping her down. She wakes in the middle of the night. The room is empty save for a sleeping nurse. The pain has changed. It is no longer sharp. It is a dull, throbbing vastness that consumes her entire universe. She feels the metal plates fusing to her ribs. She feels the green smoke filling her lungs, choking her. "Please," she rasps into the darkness, "take it off." But there's no one to hear. The king has stopped visiting. The smell is too strong for his delicate constitution. Silas only comes to tighten the screws, though now he does it quickly, holding his breath, his eyes avoiding the dark fluid leaking onto the bedclothes. She realizes the ultimate irony. The device was meant to make her perfect for the dynasty, to ensure she could bear strong children. But the iron has crushed her womb. The infection has poisoned her blood. There will be no air. There is only the metal. She tries to take a deep breath, to scream, to summon the guards, to beg for mercy. But the corset holds firm. It allows her only a shallow gasp. It denies her even the dignity of a death rattle. She dies silently, her eyes wide open, staring at the velvet canopy, her spine perfectly, terrifically straight. They found her in the morning. She looked like a doll that had been broken and put back in its box. Rigor mortis had set in, freezing her limbs, but the corset had already done the work of rigor for months. The king ordered the device removed before the burial preparations. He did not want God to see what he had done to his wife. Master Silas was summoned one last time. The removal was not a medical procedure. It was an excavation. The hinges had rusted shut with dried blood and bodily fluids. They had to use crowbars. Sound effects, the screech of rusted metal giving way. When the front plate was finally pried loose, the sound was not a click but a wet tearing. The metal had adhered to the necrotic flesh. As the casing came away, it took pieces of the queen with it. The maids who were present vomited. The king turned his face to the wall. Beneath the guardian of grace, Isolda was a ruin. Her ribs were crushed inwards. Her skin was black and green, eaten away by ulcers that exposed the white gleam of bone. Her stomach was bruised purple. The perfect straightness was a lie. Her body was a mass of broken geometry, held together only by rot. Silas looked at his work. He did not see a tragedy. He saw structural success. "The spine," he whispered, pointing to the corpse's back with a bloody finger. "Look, it is straight." He was dismissed from court that day, paid in full, and told never to return. The funeral was grand. The queen was dressed in a high-collared gown that hid the horror of her neck and torso. She was laid to rest in the royal crypt, under a heavy stone lid. But the final insult was yet to come. The king commissioned the greatest sculptor in the land to carve her effigy for the tomb. He gave specific instructions. "Make her tall," the king commanded. "Make her straight. Let history see her as she should have been." And so, today, if you visit the old cathedral, you will see the marble tomb of Queen Isolda. She lies there in white stone, serene and perfect. Her back is flat against the slab. Her posture is impeccable. Tourists look at her and sigh, admiring the beauty of a bygone age. They do not know that beneath the marble lies the dust of a woman who was crushed to death by the weight of perfection. They do not smell the green smoke. They do not hear the phantom creak of the screws tightening in the dark. They see only the lie, and the lie is beautiful.